going to King's Landing. Make it a son for a son.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. House of the Dragon released a new trailer. There's a bunch of new footage, particularly a lot of blood and cheese stuff going on during this. Mostly episode 1, but also footage from other episodes too, so we'll break it all down. There's a ton of Easter eggs for House of the Dragon and for the original Game of Thrones series. If you're brand new to the channel, I'm doing videos for all the episodes just like I did for the original series. We'll also do a weekly giveaway for HBO Max subscriptions. I think they're just calling it Max now, but they change the name of the service like every single year, so whatever service it airs on in your country. Just starting with the important stuff, Daemon talking about an eye for an eye, a son for a son. That's the full line in the books.
Make it a son for a son.
During the trailers, you see him in the map table room talking to Rhaenys in his full armor, saying that we're going to King's Landing. She seems very reticent, like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, do we want to escalate things that quickly? This is meant to pick up about 10 days after the end of episode 10 from season 1, so not that much time has gone by. Rhaenyra is gone crazy trying to find Lucerys. She hasn't slept in the last 10 days. You also remember it hasn't been that long since Viserys has died, so on both sides, the Blacks and the Greens are both grieving for a bunch of different people for a bunch of different reasons. But it's Daemon here who seems like he fires the next salvo, like the next retaliation for what happened with Lucerys in Aemond. There were a couple other scenes where you see Rhaenyra questioning him, like, do you accept me as your ruler? It seems like there's some tension between the two of them that leads to a falling out.
Do you accept me as your queen and ruler?
Part of the idea is that Daemon wants to retaliate immediately. He and both Aemon on both sides are sort of the ones that are pushing them further and further towards war. Like, no, we need to start the war right now. Whereas people like Rhaenyra, people like Alicent, even Otto Hightower are cautioning restraint. Like, no, let's talk this out, like, let's figure this out. We don't need to actually have a war. Then you see some footage of Daemon dropping some gold coins in someone's hand. This seems like it's on the shores of King's Landing. We finally get that new scene of Mysaria. She's dropped her crazy accent that everybody was really confused by, like she's toned it way down when it comes to the accent. And part of the idea is that Daemon goes to Mysaria to execute his plan, an eye for an eye, a son for a son. He wants to retaliate against the Greens. And we get a bunch of scenes with blood and cheese across all the trailers they've released so far. They've sort of parsed it apart, but you do get a good look at them. Instead of Daemon himself actually going to the Red Keep and trying to kill one of the Greens himself, he goes to Mysaria and she hires Blood and Cheese to do the deed. Their names are just aliases. Blood is actually called Blood the Butcher, but his real name is just lost to history. Nobody knows what it actually is. The Fire and Blood book that details his history just calls him by that name. But he's meant to be a former sergeant of the City Watch of King's Landing, one of the Gold Cloaks, who was still loyal to Daemon after he'd been kicked out after Rhaenyra left. After Otto Hightower and the Greens crowned Aegon II king, they basically replaced all the Gold Cloaks they could with people that were loyal to the Greens. If you remember during season 1, Daemon said a few of them were still loyal to him during their war council. He was going to try and make contact with them at some point. This is some point, like it's arrived. As a former sergeant of the Gold Cloaks, Blood had been a very high-ranking, high-paid member of the Gold Cloaks. Remember, they were complaining about that during season 1, like, why are we using so much money to beef up these Gold Cloaks? Do we actually need their cloaks to be gold? Like, do we need to give them a bunch of new armor? Why is their pay so high? Daemon is the person who actually created the Gold Cloaks. They were just the regular City Watch before that. He turned them into the Gold Cloaks. So at the time, most of those Gold Cloaks that were serving under him loved him because he was showering them with money. But at some point during that transition after episode 9, when the Greens basically replaced a lot of the Gold Cloaks with ones loyal to them, he'd been kicked out of the Gold Cloaks for being caught beating a woman to death in Flea Bottom at one of the brothels. Not all the members of the City Watch were quite as virtuous as the members of the Kingsguard, but you have people like Jaime Lannister in the present day of Game of Thrones being part of the Kingsguard doing all kinds of degenerate stuff. So naturally them, as well as Daemon, take advantage of everything that Flea Bottom and King's Landing has to offer in terms of entertainment. Which provides an excellent segue to this week's sponsor, DraftKings Casino, your favorite real money casino games right at your fingertips. Choose from over 300 real money games, slots, blackjack, roulette, and live dealer games whenever you want. With more real money games added regularly, DraftKings Casino is changing the game with new ways to play. If DraftKings Casino isn't available in your state yet, you can still check out DraftKings Daily Fantasy app where you have a shot at winning cash prizes all season long. Go to DraftKings Casino, use the promo code EMERGENCYAWESOME, and you can receive $50 in casino credits with any $5 game that you play. That's $50 in casino credit when you use the promo code and you play a minimum $5 game. So be sure to check it out and play responsibly. But after Mysaria, who's now serving as Rhaenyra's Mistress of Whispers, sort of like her version of Varys, learns about what happens with blood, clocks that he's a person who's willing to do those kinds of brutal things for them, doesn't have a moral problem with it. During the later footage, you see a gold cloak here standing behind the gate with someone trying to get in, pushing through the gate here. This might be blood that they're looking at. Then there are a couple of scenes with Cheese, the other half of this equation, holding the torch, leading the two of them, Blood and Cheese, through the many hidden passageways in the castle that Maegor the Cruel had constructed throughout the Red Keep. They teased all the hidden passageways in the Red Keep during Season 1, a little during the original Game of Thrones episodes. Like you see Arya sort of sneaking around the Red Keep. That's because she's found some of the passageways. But they got way more into that during House of the Dragon Season 1. They were how Daemon would sneak in and out when he was younger to get up to no good and Flea Bottom, just do whatever he felt like doing on the regular. Then the idea is that he taught Rhaenyra about them, where to find them, where they led to when she was younger, and she just continued to use those secret passageways through to her adulthood with all those time jumps to continue her affairs with other men, primarily Harwin Strong, who was the father of Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey. She might have had brief other affairs with other people when she was much younger during that time jump, but I think based on the timeline and how old Jacaerys is in present day, she just started getting it on with Harwin Strong pretty soon after that and just stayed with him until his death at Harrenhal at the hands of his brother Larys Strong. R.I.P. The other half of the equation, though, Cheese, was the alias of a rat catcher in the Red Keep whose job was exactly what you think it is, what the name implies. He caught rats. That's how he learned about all the secret passageways that allowed him to sneak himself and Blood through to the chambers of Helaena Targaryen, where they execute Daemon's intended son for a son plan, an eye for an eye, a son for a son, further escalating the Dance of the Dragons between the Blacks and the Greens. Based on the other trailer footage, it seems like this leads to a big fallout between Rhaenyra and Daemon because Rhaenyra didn't really have anything to do with this actual plan, even though she did hate the Greens for what happened to Lucerys. She blames them, even though the way we saw it go down, like we saw the actual events and it was an accident, that Aemon didn't mean to kill him. Part of what happens after this, according to the actor who plays Aemon in a new interview, says that he goes back to King's Landing and he can do one of two things. He can confess that it was an accident to his mother, Alicent, and the rest of the Greens, like, I didn't mean to kill him, we don't need this to lead to a war, we can apologize for this. Or because he's so obsessed with becoming the most Targaryen person in the history of their family, like he's obsessed with being feared in King's Landing and beefing up the clout behind his name. He figures that if he goes back to King's Landing and tells them that he did this on purpose, he'll become the most wanted man in King's Landing, the most infamous man in King's Landing, and he loves that idea. So you can kind of see how things start to spill over and escalate into like the full-blown wars that we see during Season 2. Whereas on both sides, like Alicent here looking at him like she's horrified, like this is probably him telling her about what happened with Lucerys, like, you did what? Then you have Rhaenyra getting really pissed off at Daemon getting really pissed off at her. It seems like this is when he departs and goes to Harrenhal to try and take Harrenhal for the Blacks. Mostly because he's upset that they're not actually doing anything, like they haven't actually moved to action yet, the war hasn't started, and he really, really wants it to start. Don't want to get too much further into the events of Blood and Cheese. That'll be largely taken care of during Episode 1. It's the fallout that we see in Episode 2 and beyond that really escalates things. So if you have read the books, you know all about that. Please don't post too many spoilers in the comments. There's a bunch of other footage here too, like there's a bunch of Daemon at Harrenhal, and one of the funny things, I think they play this in a really interesting way, where Daemon has Caraxes, so nobody at Harrenhal is capable of stopping him from just showing up and saying that he's captured the keep. Like, it's mine now, you all have to get out. It seems like he just shows up one day, walks in his armor with his sword, and claims it as his. It doesn't seem like there's a bunch of people there that put up much of a fight. But one of the major problems of Harrenhal is that it is nearly impossible to defend, and it's almost more of a liability than it is a boon. You also have the curse of Harrenhal too, ever since the time of Aegon the Conqueror. Harrenhal completed building the castle, the largest in all of Westeros, just as the conquest of the Seven Kingdoms had started. One of Aegon the Conqueror's first acts during the conquest was to go to Harrenhal, demand that he swear fealty. When he basically spat in his face, he took Balerion the Black Dread and just burnt the castle. So up to present day, that's why you see a lot of the spires that still look like they've been melted. That basically started the curse of Harrenhal, so that anybody that would later hold Harrenhal would meet with some untimely end. Later we saw during Season 1, something similar happens to Harwin Strong, Lionel Strong, because Larys Strong essentially killed them. During the original Game of Thrones series, Littlefinger is actually given Harrenhal, and when they're talking about it, part of the joke is the idea that it's so big, it's impractical, it's impossible to garrison, impossible to defend, and it's usually given to someone who the crown hates but owes a favor to. Like, we don't really like you that much, you can have this. And it seems like a big crown jewel, when really, in fact, it's actually pretty bad. But because Daemon is obsessed with Aegon the Conqueror, like all historical Targaryens are, he wants to sack Harrenhal because it's so big he thinks it'll send a message to the Greens, and it'll help box them in. But all these scenes of him walking through the halls looking kind of unhinged seems like he's started to see things. There might be some crazy visions that the characters get during Season 2. It seems like there are a couple scenes in the trailers where different characters are having visions. Daemon's might be the result of Alice Rivers, who's colloquially known as the Witch of Harrenhal. Like, she doesn't actually have magic as far as we know. They might change that on the show, but she might be messing with Daemon so that he thinks that there are ghosts at Harrenhal. Generally, it seems like the beginning of Season 1 is going to start with a bang, metaphorically and literally, as things escalate to the actual Dance of the Dragons. But there's so much going on here. If there's any other Easter eggs and references that you spotted in the new footage that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. There are a couple other character promos they released with some new footage. I might do some videos for those in the next couple of weeks. If you have any special bonus video requests, also let me know in the comments. Everybody click here for all my other House of the Dragon Season 2 trailer videos and Easter eggs, and click here to learn why HBO canceled that Game of Thrones Jon Snow sequel series. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.